and also a business English student, certainly wanting work, tends to understand the role of the manager better than the role of anything else. So what I've tried to do is to develop a role and an approach for language teachers who teach business English that reflects the nature of work and reflects the nature of the working world. And during the time that I've worked with students, they've taught me a lot about business, but in particular a lot about management. And if any of you studied business, you might have come across the work of W.E. Deming. Now, Deming was an interesting American academic who taught management theory. And he wanted to develop a model of management that would apply to any problem-solving situation. So if there was a problem at work, he wanted to create a model that managers could follow to solve that problem. And I think what he's come up with is similar to what happens in the classroom if we regard the problem of trying to help students learn language. He's given us a model that will help teachers and that the students will respond to. What Deming did was he came up with a four-step model which is like a cycle. And I'm just going to lead you through it so that you can think about how you might apply it to your own teaching. And if you're a student, you could think about how you apply it to your own learning. First of all, he said, if you have a problem, you have to plan how you're going to solve the problem. Then you take action. You do something to put the plan into action. So you do certain steps that you plan. When you've finished doing them, you then check whether you've been successful. Now, you can only check whether you've been successful if you've planned carefully at the beginning, because you need to know what your aims and objectives were. And once you've checked, you can then plan the action that you need to take. Now, in language teaching terms, this means that as a teacher, we plan our lesson with our aim and objectives. We then go into the classroom and we do activities to try to achieve those aims and objectives. During the lesson, we check whether students have achieved what we want them to achieve. So, for example, if you'd been teaching gerunds and infinitives and your students were still saying, I enjoy to go to school, you'd check it, they weren't producing it, and so you'd decide on what action you were going to take next and then plan and start the next lesson. And so it's a cycle. Now, in business English, it's particularly useful because students generally, certainly students in work, don't want to learn necessarily what's in the book. They need to know the English they need in order to carry out their job. And if a student comes to you and says, I want to speak English better, it's not very helpful because we know that's why they've come to the class. And if we're a teacher, we can hear whether the student needs to speak English better or not. What I actually want the student to do is to come to me with a plan or a definition. And if you're a learner of a language, it's useful to define what you want to achieve with the language in order to be successful. So if a student who came to me said, I need to be able to give a short presentation at the beginning of meetings with clients about me and my bank, that's very achievable. And I need the students to define English in that way. It's no good for them to say to me, I want to learn the past simple, because I need aims which could be achieved in the class. Now, with this student, there are 3 key bits of information that the student's given me in this needs analysis. The student has told me how they communicate through a presentation. It could be on the telephone, it could be in meetings, it could be socially, but we know how they do it. The students told me who, which is important because it affects the register, the tone. If they're American clients, I need to use American English in the class and so on. And also what about me and my bank, so what is the topic? So when you do a needs analysis with business English students, there are basically three key questions. How do you communicate? Who do you communicate with? And what do you communicate about? You have to have the answers to those three questions to make an effective business English course, because we need to know that in order to then put it into action. So this is all part of our planning stage. Now I'm going to talk about how I had a one-to-one student called Ralph, okay? And he was the president of the bank. And Ralph gave me this need. We worked out together that's what he wanted to achieve. Now I could go to course books, I could go online, I could download texts about the bank and so on, but the most useful resource for me was Ralph, the learner, and start with the learner in terms of design of the activities. And I thought, okay, Ralph, you need to give a short presentation at the beginning of the meeting. So for homework, go home. Here are some phrases for giving a presentation. Prepare your presentation. Come back to the next lesson and we'll do it. He came back to the next lesson and I recorded him. I just recorded him doing the presentation in quite a relaxed way, and then we wrote out word for word everything he said. And this is what Ralph said. If you just read that, see if you can spot any errors. Does Ralph have any grammatical problems or word problems? It's not bad. In terms of Ralph communicating, the English is pretty good. We need a conjunction here maybe. Good morning and thank you for coming. We get today I like, so we need I'd like. Maybe it's a pronunciation problem, maybe it's grammatical. He has some fixed phrases, preposition difficulties. So for example, here he said responsible from. Is split in two, is missing, but it's not a big deal. He's basically produced quite a nice little presentation. To help Ralph, because I've typed it into the computer, rather than tell him his mistakes, I gap fill them. And so he compares that version with that version and he finds the mistakes himself, and we talk about what he might put in there, what words would help him. But all the language is his own. I'm not telling him what he needs to do. I'm trying to find out from him what he needs to be effective. And it's all just part of the doing stage. Once we've got that, I get a finished version of the text to use with Ralph. So he's very happy. It's his own words. He's written it. It's more motivating than me writing it for him. The problem is that Ralph has one last difficulty. This is how Ralph reads this. Good morning and thank you for coming. My name is Ralph Peterson and I'm the president. Today I'd like to talk to you about my bank. It's very flat, there isn't much pausing, and the delivery is problematic. And the problem for Ralph is his clients are coming from the United Kingdom, so I need to help Ralph add a bit of oomph, a bit of life to his presentation. So the next stage with Ralph is to put some pauses into his presentation. Students, if you ever give presentations for your teachers, this is a very useful technique. You write out your presentation and you mark where you're going to pause, and your delivery will improve no end because you're breaking it down and making it easier to deliver those long sentences to your audience. Because in English, we tend to put pauses into gaps in order to emphasize certain words in our presentations. Okay? Now I can do different things with this exercise. I can kind of listen and repeat the presentation with Ralph. So I can say good morning and Ralph could go good morning and thank you for coming and thank you for coming. So I kind of drill him, or I record it myself. What I've learnt is that if you hum the intonation as the teacher, the student focuses on the pronunciation and stops worrying about the words. And it's more effective in terms of helping the delivery of the text. So let's try it. I'm the teacher, you're all students. I'm going to hum each pause group. You're going to repeat it back with the words and beautiful intonation to improve the delivery of Ralph's presentation. Here we go.
Good morning. And thank you for coming. My name is Ralph Peterson. And I'm the president. Today, I'd like to talk to you about my band. In short, my presentation will deal with two areas. The structure and organization of my band and the main activities of the band. First of all, the company employs 4,060 people and is split into 5 divisions.
Very good. Now, I don't do this with Ralph every day because it would kill him and it would kill my throat as well. But it's a very quick way, if you're doing any pronunciation work, word stress, I just think humming is better than that kind of listen and repeat with the words because the focus is all on the movement of the intonation and so on. What I did with this, I built this up over time. Ralph would go home and practice and record it. The other thing about it is it's a great way to show a student progress because they record it and you can say to Ralph, listen to your presentation on our first lesson and now listen to the presentation 2 weeks later, and Ralph just thinks you're the best teacher in the world because you just made his presentation come alive, and he can go to his meeting, talk to his clients, and they think he's fantastic. So the doing stage is important. Planning and doing. Checking. Very simple. If you're doing the checking stage in business English, checklists are particularly effective because business students understand checklists, they understand feedback. It's part of their culture. So for example, for giving a presentation, I might have a checklist with a list of phrases I want Ralph to use. I might use a feedback form which picks up on his visual aids and the qualities of his delivery, that type of thing. But the checking stage is particularly important right after the planning. It also means, I don't know if you, as a teacher, have you ever had those lessons where you've done all the activities and then there wasn't time for feedback at the end and the students leave and the students kind of think, that was fun but I don't know why we did it, and the teacher feels dissatisfied because you didn't have that checking stage. And it's that part of the plan, do, check cycle is important, that there's always some sort of checking for errors or giving feedback at the end of any task, as you well know, but it's easy to overlook it. So with Ralph, we'd done the work with the checklist, and then I was able to look at what he'd done, look at what he'd checked, and then decide what action I'm going to take. I think it's really important that when, as a teacher, we decide what we're going to do in the lesson next as part of the act stage, we involve the students in that process. And so often I give assessing your progress forms, particularly to business students, and to get them to self-assess how their progress is. I'm sure it's something you do, but it's so important as part of that ongoing cycle that you're taking action, but they're also taking action for their own learning as well. So we've looked at planning, doing, checking, acting. Important process. Try applying it to your lessons and see how it works. It's a good way to put all the stop checks into teaching, and particularly important for business English. If you want a summary of this talk and the last talk, this is my website, eltteachertrainer.com. There are summaries of the presentations and also anything that are on the slides that you want to look at in more detail, you'll find on the website. So there's a summary of this talk here, okay? It's free. but it just summarizes things I've talked about. If you want to contact me about anything specific, you can also contact me via the website. Just leave me a message at it and I can send you anything from the session. But I'll also give you my email later on. Anyway.
That is the end of my presentation, and thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. If you can really cope with more, feel free to come back at 4 o'clock when we'll start again. Okay?
Yeah.